We're going to begin with the escalating attacks in the Middle East. The United States has bombed the central Iranian city of Isfahan. President Trump posted this video of the attack on social media. Now, Isfahan is one of the 3 sites attacked by the U.S. military last year, and it's likely home to some of Iran's highly enriched uranium. In a Pentagon press briefing, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth addressed the overnight attacks.
Just last night, we had 200 dynamic strikes alone. The video the president posted last night of Isfahan, an ammo depot struck by U.S. bombers. You see, you don't get to see many of those videos because, as a reminder, Iran has still shut off the internet to 99.9% of its population. But if Iran is wise, they will cut a deal. President Trump doesn't bluff, and he does not back down.
CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi was listening in to that press briefing. She joins us now from our D.C. bureau. And Olivia, we spoke just a few moments ago about what was and what was not said in the briefing. What jumped out to you?
Well, it's good to be with both of you. Excuse me, this morning. That was the first briefing we got in 12 days from the Pentagon, updating us on the Operation Epic Fury happening inside of Iran. Quite notable was the fact that Secretary Pete Hegseth said that over the weekend, he actually visited CENTCOM. He did not give any details about which base he did go to, but he said over the weekend he visited the region and the troops there and said, you know, he's not revealing for safety reasons exactly where he went, but he sounded grateful for meeting some of those military members who were on the ground and said that the military members he spoke to are feeling positive and saying that their goal is to finish the mission. The question is, how long is the mission now? Because we are entering the 5th week of this war that this White House said would last between 4 to 6 weeks. So the question is this conflict rounding out? Have they achieved all of their military objectives? Again, today, the Secretary of Defense laid out some of the military objectives and saying that the U.S. is on its way to achieving them, and that includes destroying the defense capability, the missile capability, making sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. But when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, which we should note was not a core objective of this Pentagon, of this administration when they entered this war, but is something that has continued to hang over them as it is pushing the price of gas and oil and fertilizer and other items across the globe much higher than it did 5 weeks ago. He says that it's not a core objective for this administration to reopen the strait, and even called on some U.S. allies, including the United Kingdom's Royal Navy, which Secretary Hegseth called the big bad Royal Navy, to step up to start managing the strait, adding that President Trump was really doing what he could in the name of freedom to attack Iran, to make sure that they don't have a nuclear weapon, that they don't continue to attack allies in the region, but saying that ultimately managing the strait should go to some of the countries who get the majority of their energy sources through that strait, that have to transit through that strait. So that was quite notable there. He also questioned the alliance of NATO, saying that what good is an ally that is not willing to come to the aid of the United States, especially in this moment, as the U.S. is continuing to attack Iran. So a notable Pentagon press briefing today, but we did not learn whether this conflict will be wrapping up anytime soon.
Glad you brought up the Strait of Hormuz becoming sort of a metric for success, because the headline today is, of course, gas price going above $4 a gallon, certainly something in the back of Defense Secretary Hegseth's mind. Also want to talk to you, we've heard a lot of questions about potential boots on the ground, a potential timeline for that operation. What are you hearing from the White House?
Well, from the Pentagon press briefing earlier today, they were asked about the troops that have just moved into the region. CBS News has done extensive reporting about the troops that have moved into the region, including Marines who have ground capabilities, other naval assets that have moved into the region. Secretary Hegseth said they're not going to comment on exactly what that mission could be. General Dan Kane said that it's a pressure point, that they're not going to remove any options for the president. They don't want to go into the president's decision space as it relates to some of the new military assets that they have moved into the region. But they said that it's a pressure point on Iran for them to look and see that the U.S. is building more assets in the region, and for that to be even more of a reason for Iran to make some sort of diplomatic deal with the United States. Our Ed O'Keefe asked Caroline Leavitt about this yesterday in the press briefing at the White House as to what Americans are supposed to think as there is a military buildup continuing to happen as the U.S. says that this war should be ramping down soon. Take a listen to what she said here.
Americans sitting at home hearing him saying, I want to talk, but I keep seeing them send troops to that region. What are they to make of what's going on?
There's two tracks here. The president has always said that diplomacy is his #1 option and priority. So if there's ever a chance for a deal, again, the president is open to listening, but it does not deter him from focusing on the military objectives that he set out 30 days ago and that our military is continuing to achieve day by day.
I should note that also echoes what we heard from Secretary Hegseth this morning, that the primary goal, the primary effort of this administration continues to be a diplomatic peace deal rather than military options.
All right, Olivia, thank you. For more on this, we're joined by CBS News contributor and Free Press columnist Elliot Ackerman. Good to have you on set with us today. So we just asked Olivia about this idea of boots on the ground. We're already hearing from Iran that they're warning it's waiting for U.S. soldiers to arrive so it can punish them and their regional partner. Obviously, very intense rhetoric. Do you think that they're trying to goad, the U.S. into more of an on-the-ground conflict?
I don't know if they're necessarily trying to goad the U.S. into that conflict, but I'm certain the Iranian regime understands the profound significance of a decision to commit U.S. ground forces. But the Trump administration is also in a position where if it wants those U.S. ground forces to be a credible threat, you have to pre-position them because it takes, as we've seen, weeks for them to get on station.
Now, it's interesting when you say, the goading question, because we've also watched as Iran has seemed to perfect its online trolling kind of psychological campaign against the U.S. using AI videos that have Lego figurines to kind of also act as if they are winning. We heard Secretary Hegseth criticize effectively the U.K. for not contributing its navy to the effort. Yesterday, we spoke with a minister from France who said they don't yet know what the clear objectives are from the U.S. before they join in. And moments ago, President Trump just criticized France directly via Truth Social, saying they've just not done enough. What does this tell us about the position the U.S. is in? Strength being signaled from the Pentagon, but it appears this is not going to plan.
It also seems that the Trump administration is using the current crisis in Iran to also signal a renegotiation of terms with our allies. And before this conflict, we also saw that in Ukraine, just sort of the continual chorus of, allies need to do more, allies need to do more. So I think, whenever this crisis in Iran reaches its conclusion, you're probably, at least from the Trump administration, going to see a resumption of negotiations, sort of as what is our relationship with our allies.
But do you foresee a conclusion with the Strait of Hormuz closed?
I can't imagine one where the Strait of Hormuz is closed, but I also don't necessarily see a clear path for the administration to opening the strait. So we're at a little bit of loggerheads here because the bombing campaign doesn't seem to be having the effect on the Iranian regime to get them to open the strait. They understand that the strait is one of their biggest points of leverage.
And of course, as folks go to the gas pump, they see prices go up, there's going to be a lot more pressure on the administration, especially as we go into a midterm election. One of your pieces recently, you talked about how it's possible to see this all going wrong, even if every citizen in Iran should be rooting for this regime to be overturned. Do you think that we're seeing the beginnings of that play out? Because as you just described, we do seem to be a little bit of an impasse in terms of how we go forward.
All right. Well, I mean, it seemed at the beginning of this conflict, the strategy from the Trump administration was, a very punishing initial campaign against the Iranians with the hope that the Iranian people, as they did in December and January of this year, would come out into the streets and topple the regime. That obviously, has not happened and does not seem as though it's going to happen. And so what we see in war is there's always a move and a counter move. And the strategic counter move on the part of the Iranian regime was to shut the Strait of Hormuz and begin implementing maximum economic pressure on the U.S. So we're sort of at a point now where the U.S. has to make a counter move. And that's how war works. And I think we'll continue to see that cycle as this conflict continues.
And just before we let you go, as this drags into its 5th week, what is the pressure on Gulf states, U.S. allies who are really bearing the brunt and the financial cost, whether it's drop of tourism in places like UAE or the security umbrella that seem to be around Qatar?
Well, and we've seen it. That's what the Iranians have done effectively as well, as they've created regional pressure on our Gulf allies, and they want to see this war come to conclusion because it takes the entire region and makes it seem like it's not a safe place to visit for tourism, and it calls into question if it's a safe place to invest. So we're seeing a huge upheaval here in the region. I think we all need to be watching.
All right, Elliot Ackerman, always great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to CBS News senior foreign correspondent Liz Palmer from London. What's the latest on the fighting at this hour? Kind of set the scene for us.
Well, the big strikes occurred overnight. The one that President Trump posted on Truth Social, great fireball in the night, was in the city of Esfahan. It appears to be an ammunition depot and maybe weapons manufacturing installation. But there were hundreds of other strikes all around Iran, including in the center of Tehran, where the Iranians say a missile hit a residential building and 11 people, civilians, were killed. Those strikes also appeared to cause widespread power failures, which affected the civilian population, although the Iranian capability for fixing the war damage is quite astounding, and the electricity company managed to get the power back on in a couple of hours, so the city is still electrified. There was also another major attack overnight, and that was on an oil tanker. It was actually in port in Dubai, a Kuwaiti tanker. It seems to have been struck by some projectile fired from an Iranian drone. It was a direct hit. The ship suffered big damage to the hull, and it did catch fire, but fortunately the main oil cargo did not get ablaze, which would have been a real catastrophe.
And Liz, as we were speaking after the briefing moments ago, you mentioned how unpopular this war is among many European nations, despite the need for fuel from the Strait of Hormuz. Asia needs fuel from this location as well. And you had said, look, just look at a map to see why Iran is able to lock this down. I was speaking with a friend recently who also just didn't understand the geography and how such a key waterway could be blocked for so long. Explain for our viewers why this narrow strait is having such global implications.
Well, 20% of the world's oil, that's many millions of barrels, come down this waterway, which is like a long tube, but there is a choke point in the middle. That's the Strait of Hormuz. And as I said to you a short while ago, you could practically swim across. It's that narrow, just over 20 miles. And the Iranians control the north shore of that choke point. Secretary Hegseth made a big point of saying that Iran's conventional navy has been destroyed, and that's quite right. It's pretty much out of action. But the Revolutionary Guard have got the Strait of Hormuz covered with all kinds of very small attack capabilities. For example, these armed speedboats, these ribs that have been harassing ships now for months and months. Also, installations on the shore, capability of laying mines, sending torpedoes. And it's very hard to see those things, let alone take them out with a big missile strike. They're little, think of them as mosquitoes. And as long as Iran can threaten tankers with this kind of micro attack, insurers just won't let the ships move. And that's why the oil is stopped. It's very hard for the great might of the U.S. military to fight what is essentially a guerrilla war on the water. And that gives the Iranians the upper hand in controlling the strait.
Yeah, I understand your point, but you must be a strong swimmer to cross 22 miles, Liz. Come on, 1 mile maybe. But Liz, we know you've been to Iran many times. You know it better than the rest of us. Thank you so much.